Thanks to your input as well. You're referring to the Jordan Education Initiative, which was born out of WEF and which brought the private sector from inside of Jordan, outside of Jordan, companies such as Cisco, to work in partnership with the Jordanian government. We've started 100 discovery schools, and we've been using a lot of the new technology, new materials, and testing it in those schools. So those kinds of innovative partnerships really go a long way. Another one is Madrasati, which is a program that I started 2 years ago. Now, if you told me before 2 years that any entity other than the Ministry of Education is going to be involved in our public schools, I would have said no way, because that was only in the domain of the government. But then what we did is that we identified the worst-run public schools, and we got members from the private sector to come and help us fix those schools, and members from the NGO community. So we have 70 partners now. We fixed 200 schools, and what's really been amazing for me to see is this the synergy that has arisen. The fact that the communities feel so empowered. Whenever I go to those schools, I always get the sense of there's this buzz of productivity and prosperity, a sense of purpose. And I really do believe from this experience that we really need to. Somebody in the audience was mentioning that we need to break that mold, that it's not just the government. And once that mold is broken, that opens up a whole load of possibilities for us to really perfect the educational.
I'd like a quick final thought from you, Your Majesty, on something that I know you're very, very passionate about, that education can change, for example, the Middle East region, which has its troubles, which has its issues, from resources through to political conflicts. Yeah. How can education change?
Yeah, if we just get away from the technical a little bit and just go back to the human side, why am I passionate about education? For me, it's about justice. And John, you say this all the time, that it's the great equalizer. All of us are born with advantages and disadvantages. You might have a rich dad, somebody else might, be extremely good looking, whatever. The education is one way to really mute the disparities between people, to really give people the chance to make the most of the opportunities that are presented to them and to create opportunities. I've heard it said that the saddest thing is not death, but the saddest thing is when your dreams die while you're alive. And I think that's what happens when you're illiterate. You don't have a chance, you get trapped. When I look at my region, the Middle East, I feel that education can really be the balm that can soothe a lot of the social ailments that plague our region. If you look at our demographics, 60% of our population is under the age of 25. So, and that said, we have one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. 1 out of 4 of these young kids don't have a job. So they are, I call them a generation in waiting, because they're stuck in this transition between schools and the workplace. And part of the reason is that the educational system has failed them. It hasn't given them the skills to get a job. And that, in spite of the fact that over the last 10 years, we've had one of the fastest, very fast rate of economic growth, but that hasn't reflected on job creation. So what's going to happen to these young people? They have an irrelevant education. They're frustrated. That's what can lead to radicalization, extremism. The converse is also great. If we're able to create jobs for these young kids, then you could really see a tsunami change in the region. That demographic bulge can be a major change in outlook, in mindsets, in thought process. It can really transform our region. If you look at Palestine, there are 108,000 Palestinian kids that don't go to school today. That's up from 4,000 10 years ago. These kids are growing up under the shadow of an occupation. They're scarred by conflict. They see no hope, no future. How can we expect for there to be any sense of normality without an education? And I personally have given up on the politicians of this generation on both sides of this conflict. And I feel that the future is with the younger generation. And the fact that we need to try to erase the prejudices and the deeply entrenched hatreds. And that can only happen through a quality education. Look at Iraq. 2 million kids don't go to school in Iraq. Their daily lessons are in violence, in hunger. How is Iraq going to move forward without getting those children to school? And finally, women. Now in different Arab countries, women have achieved different levels of progress in the economic and social fields and political fields. But there is it's all a variation. The situation is a variation of a common theme, and that is gender injustice. you know, and it's only through getting our girls into school, making sure that they reap the benefits of their education by being in the workplace, by having curricula that addresses some of the stereotypes against girls. That's when we can really try to change mindsets. So in a region that's now very much associated with extremism, I think it could be a region associated with hope, and the only way to achieve that is through a quality education.
Well, as always, we have so many issues, and so many fantastic issues have been raised that need more discussion. I hope it's something that doesn't stop here and does carry on. We never have enough time in these kind of sessions to touch on everything and to expand on everything, and I apologize for those of you who had your hands up and we couldn't get to your questions. It's important, though, that education is now being so seriously taken. You know, we're reading the signs, so to speak, and I always say it's important to read the signs correctly. In Virginia, where I'm based, in Washington, D.C. area, a state trooper, a policeman, drove onto Route 10, onto the freeway, and saw this car driving very, very slowly. And he was like, this is more dangerous than someone speeding, so he was a bit worried. He pulled the car over, and it was filled with very elderly ladies. And he walked up to the driver, old woman sitting there at the wheel, and he noticed the passengers' ghostly pale faces. They were terrified, you know. And he said to the driver, he said, what are you doing? She said, officer, I'm just driving at the speed limit. He said, what do you mean driving at the speed limit? You're going so slowly. She said, no, it said 10. I'm driving at 10 miles an hour. He said, no, 10 is the name of the road. It's not. She said, I saw the sign 10. He said, no, that's not the speed limit. It's Route 10. You're on Route 10. That's the name of the road. So she was embarrassed and said, I'm sorry. He said, I'm just going to give you a warning this time. But before I let you go, I have to ask you, why are your passengers? They look terrified. What's happened? She said, they'll be all right in a moment. They just got off Route 120. Important to read the signs properly. Please, a big warm thanks to our panel for raising so many key issues.